Welcome back to the Sovereignpreneur Show. Today, we're going to be doing a lot of thinking out loud, thinking in public, if you will, because there's been a lot of developments, both with ourselves individually and as a team, and the world, and the Bitcoin space, and politics, and everything. And so we've been really bringing our heads together to figure out what's next. And I would say the biggest catalyst of this is the developments in AI. So let's get started. I think a good place to start is by talking a bit about Bitcoin and the cutting edge technology that we've always been interested in, how it's brought us to this point, and where we think it goes from here. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, one of the things that I've always been interested, right, is in how technology is going to change the world. And I think this originated with Bitcoin or with money, because, when I understood the implications of the fiat currency and what that meant and how they were basically siphoning off our life force, siphoning off, the value that we create from our time and our energy, I was looking for an answer to that, right? Because once you figure that out, you see the chains, right? The invisible chains that hold you down. And so they just basically, they hit it well through the monetary system. So you're looking for an alternative, and that leads you to technology, and Bitcoin was there. When I first got into it, I really understood right away the implications that this could have, at least from the individual perspective, right? All of a sudden, you have an option not to participate in a system that's corruptive and corrosive in its nature. And so, watching the Bitcoin space and the cryptocurrency space and its development was something that was super interesting, right? It's the first time I made an attempt to actually understand the mechanisms behind the technology, to even look at code and read white papers and understand the math behind things. And so that's when that road led me down to understanding the implications through reading books like The Sovereign Individual. And, The Sovereign Individual paints a picture of the future where technology is going to be very empowering to the individual. It's going to liberate the individual and free them from some of the shackles that we see in legacy systems, and then also allow them to basically design and then produce a future and a life which aligns with them. And so when I understood how technology was going to liberate us, that's when I was starting to really look at these trends on how we can ride that technological wave to create more freedom, sovereignty, agency, and autonomy in our lives.
Right. So that was Bitcoin. And that sovereign individual thesis is kind of playing out. Bitcoin is here. It's here to stay. But now we're entering the next wave of technology coming around, of the nation state kind of clamping down as far as the sovereign individual story goes. And, I think I just read someone made the correlation of Trump's tariffs and the External Revenue Service is one of the final stages of that. The state, trying to protectionism is one of the final stages of that state as the sovereign individual is made able to flee and that. So I actually found that interesting because I just read The Sovereign Individual recently, and yeah, Trump is doing that same kind of thing with the protectionism. But yeah, so AI is the next phase here. And when we talk about sovereignty, we could lose a lot of it with AI running everything, running society, being in our homes, having little robots with LLMs hard coded into their circuitry. I think I saw the Tesla vacuum cleaner robot today for the cars. And, you and I are just two normal dudes, but people working in this industry have a much better sense of the gravity of what's going on here.
Well, I think that's one aspect, right, of the way that AI goes. It goes into a kind of dystopian future. Or there's another aspect where it's massive abundance, right, where robots and AIs create a world where all our needs are met and our problems are solved. So it's going to be interesting to see which way that goes. But here's the thing. We don't know. And right now we're in a transition phase, right? One thing that I'm starting to really like grok. And when I say grok, right, it's like one of these words from Robert Heinlein.
It's not the AI for Twitter.
Yeah, yeah.
They named it after Robert Heinlein.
Yes, that's right. So, but it just means to like internally understand the implications, right? In a way that's very real. And in this case, I'm starting to recognize just how disruptive a force AI is going to be. Like, especially with the recent advancements with DeepSeek and R1 and the kind of arms race that now has started because of it. This is going to advance much more rapidly. And we're getting to a point also where it's like recursive in the sense that the advancements that we make with AI can be used to further advance AI.
Right.
And so it's going to happen. It's a compounding effect that's going to happen at just breakneck speed, something that's going to leave a lot of people disoriented because changes are going to happen so fast. And I don't think many people are aware of that. And so it's one of the things that I've been exploring because I want to see how we can navigate that. Going back to the sovereign individual thesis, they predict this transition phase where it's going to be a lot of turmoil, and those who are able to stay at the leading edge are going to benefit from that because they're going to have like asymmetric knowledge that other people don't. And so I really want to pay attention to this so, you know, I can position myself in a way to thrive and not get captured by the turmoil and the disruption that's about to come.
Right. And, you know, imagine we're still a step ahead of many people because we know about Bitcoin, right? We understand Bitcoin. So I think that's the first step is, and going back to how we started this conversation, is Bitcoin is what got us here, right? And now Bitcoin has kind of reached critical mass. It's going, and nothing we can do or any individual can really do is really going to change the trajectory of Bitcoin at this point. Because now we got nation states, Wall Street playing with big money, doing what they're doing. Bitcoin will be Bitcoin.
Can I say something on that?
Yeah.
So yeah, what you're saying is correct, right? There's going to be, at this point, just a few key individual players that can actually influence the direction that Bitcoin's evolution takes. And where does that leave the average Bitcoiner, right? Like on Twitter, commenting and making memes, even that's going to be less effective, right? Even though that influences the culture. But like when AI can make a meme 1,000 times better than yours, and not only that, create a bot army that unleashes that, you know, just in general, the average Bitcoiner is going to have very little influence now as far as the development of this space.
Well, real quick, before we keep going with that thought, you've been in the Bitcoin space a long time, and you were a part of it back when you could actually say things on Twitter about Bitcoin, and it could potentially become a talking point.
Yeah,
like among the masses, right?
And that's happened. I don't know if you want to. Are you switched to me?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's happened now a couple times where me as a pleb, right, who's just interested in the Bitcoin space, doesn't really have a technical background, was able to spin up some threads and spark up conversations around the privacy and fungibility issues, and get people like Adam back engaging in the comment section. And so, yeah, it did feel like that for a long time, where it's like, okay, cool, like, you know, the space is small enough where, you know, if you're interested in it, you can make an impact. But now, like you said, I think we've reached critical mass, and like the impact that the average person can have is becoming less and less.
Yeah, it makes me wonder even too, like the core devs and, you know, whoever they're funded by. It'll be interesting to see how Bitcoin evolves, basically. But back to the initial thread. So Bitcoin brought us here, and I remember in the like 2017 ICO hypes, you know, the big narrative was that blockchain is going to disrupt everything, you know, like from insurance to legal to everything. Blockchain is going to be, and I don't think blockchain's been that disruptive. Now, I could be wrong here. I know it's a helpful tool in certain circumstances, but in a lot of cases, having a centralized MySQL database in your server room is still a better move than dealing with a blockchain, because you don't need it. And so there was a big hype around the blockchain is going to be so disruptive, and even Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to be so disruptive. It still hasn't really been that disruptive, aside from the fact that it's worth over $100,000 a coin at this point, and now nation states are taking over. But even then, I don't think Bitcoin has been that disruptive. So with AI, though, I think the ramifications and the disruptability is a lot more clear, because you can have a conversation with ChatGPT right now and learn anything. Imagine being in high school right now and the essays you have to write and your homework. Like, imagine having ChatGPT for that. That's absolutely crazy.
Well, yeah. Let's just talk about, something we were joking around about yesterday, right? And that was, we're thinking about who to schedule on our podcast to have kind of subject matter experts explain certain things, right? And then through our conversation, we were kind of joking around, was like, why don't we just have an AI agent on as a guest, where we basically feed it a book and a bunch of research papers, and then we ask it questions, right, within a certain context, and have it explain to us, and answer our question. And really, this AI agent might do it in a way that's actually better than a human, right? In fact, I probably bet on it, where they're going to be able to explain to us and answer our questions. And so I was like, well, what if in the future all our guests are just AI agents, because they're just more knowledgeable and can even, use human inflection, tones, and create a personality that just is a lot more digestible, right, for listening purposes. And I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy to think about,
It's crazy to think about. And it's also, in practice, when it actually plays out, I don't think that was a joke. We're really going to do that. We're going to have a third co-host that's just an AI. Although there's going to be latency, I realize. So I don't know how smooth it's going to go. It might have to have post-production. But anyway, the point is it doesn't mean having a human guest isn't better. Like, I think having a real person here still creates, like, for better conversation. I think there's really something special about the idea sphere that humans can live in. And then when a bunch of people are in a room and discussing an idea, more ideas come up and they all kind of breed. And then, like, you're in a vortex of thought together, which is something I think pretty unique to humans. I don't know if AIs can do that. They do that in a way. Well, obviously a DeepSeek with its reasoning, like, they do that in a way. So maybe to the point is having an AI guest in here with the ideas, it would allow us to have a guest with infinite, instead of pull that up, Jamie, pull that up, Matt, like, oh, what was the stat on that? It's connected to the internet, can give us the stat, and then kind of craft and formulate thoughts and inferences just from being connected to everything.
And that goes back to the disruptive nature, right? Like, we can theoretically pretty soon have an AI agent produce our podcast, which can pull up stats and data and clips way faster and way more efficiently than an actual producer can. So where does that leave Matt, right? And so that's really, the disruption that I'm getting at. Like, people are going to be disrupted and their jobs in all types of ways. And that's going to have so many downstream effects that, I think we really need to think through. And a lot of the questions that we need to be asking right now around AI and its development are, like, existential and philosophical in nature, right? Like, what gives human beings meaning now? Where do they find purpose? And it's in discovering those questions where, people are really going to thrive, because in a world where AI dominates, which I think is going to happen pretty soon, a lot of people are going to be displaced.
So we're kind of coming from, like, just to keep the thread going, is the whole thing about Bitcoin is that it's no longer really this peer-to-peer project and whatever. It's probably on its way to disrupt the world in some form, especially if there's some kind of reserve. I think Trump has some executive orders he's signing today, and people think it's going to be the Bitcoin strategic reserve. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. But anyway, there is so much happening in the AI space right now. Whereas in Bitcoin, it gives people purpose to orange pill and to educate and to preach to other Bitcoiners about Bitcoin, which Joe Nakamoto had a really good line yesterday at the Plan B conference. He's like, raise your hand if you think Bitcoiners spend too much time educating other Bitcoiners. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So a lot of people find a lot of purpose in educating about Bitcoin, and for good reason, right? Like you get into Bitcoin, you wait 5 years, you very well could have a life-changing moment with your wealth changing, right? Like, so there's good reason for that. But when we're talking about an age where AI does everything, and they call it the post-scarcity society, and we just live in abundance, and there's time, and there's some version of UBI. There's complex discussions online about what UBI is going to mean in this post-scarcity, because it's a whole economic shift, the post-scarcity world, right? And I think the title of that guy, what's his name, Emao, of his page, what happens when capital no longer needs labor? How does labor gain capital? And that's the economic, question here. That's the big question here. So there needs to be some kind of UBI, but at the same time, there also needs to be like a universal AI that everyone has to just keep up with being in this society. So how are governments going to play into that? How is the state going to play? What does it mean? Are you a laborer? Are you an employee? Do you run a business? And so you mentioned purpose. And I think being an entrepreneur is going to be it's just what everyone is naturally going to become, because as humans, we like to solve problems. We feel good solving problems, and we all solve problems differently, which makes us all unique. And when all our basic needs are covered, we're just going to try to find problems to solve. So we're all going to become entrepreneurs.
Maybe. I mean, maybe there's a aspect of that. I mean, this is where, you can get kind of conspiratorial, right? Because as human beings need to find fulfillment in problem solving or in some type of purpose in this world, right? And they can't because AI takes care of everything. Well, maybe it's advantageous to, alter people's general sense of what happiness is through, maybe a concoction that you need to get injected into your arm. Anyways, that goes into a dystopian kind of future, but I think ultimately what we're trying to get at here is that we don't know what the future holds, but in terms of disruption, like I think Bitcoin is on its journey right now, and it is what it is. Like there's not going to be any more impact. Well, let me rephrase that. It is what it is. It's on its journey, and the impact that any individual can have is kind of like really, you're really distracting.
This is where having a human producer is. I mean, I wish there was one in the room because I'm running around trying to fix the light while you're talking. Sorry, but an AI producer couldn't do it.
Can we just I think we're good.
Yeah, we're
regardless.
Good. We're good now, unless it was a robot. Imagine having a robot podcast producer.
So
in the
that's
room.
the other aspect of it. But here's the point: the disruptive nature of AI is going to be orders of magnitude more than Bitcoin. And I feel like that's where it's important to put a lot of your resources and capital and attention to right now, is observing how that disruption happens, and then also understanding the implications, and then also positioning yourself well. So in terms of where my attention is going, it's going to be going less into how Bitcoin is going to be making an impact in society, because at this point, I think it's already maybe 80% of the way there. And more about how AI is going to be impacting society, because that is something that is on the horizon. And I think it's going to be orders of magnitude bigger than anything that Bitcoin will have.
And I think, as you mentioned earlier, one of your passions is in technology as a tool for sovereignty, right? Of the individual, freedom. And that really is what AI can be. Even right now, you learn how to use AI agents properly. You can, whether you're integrating that into a business or creating a business from it, you learn how to do that stuff. You can make a living. Well, you can make a fortune.
We were talking about it earlier, and we were talking about, okay, where do we go as a company, Sovereignty Studios? And I was like, maybe we transition to some type of AI R&D firm, right? Because just swimming in that soup, right? Being at the cutting edge of how things are developing, I think is naturally going to give you an information advantage that is going to allow you to create a business. And that's another thing we were talking about, right? Maybe R&D is where we need to put our attention to right now, because anything we build is going to be disrupted by AI. Like things are going to move so fast and advance so quickly that, we could build something and then a few months by now, it's disrupted, right?
Well, it's what I mentioned the other day, right? Imagine you have an event and you need videography, and there's just a bunch of little robots going around doing all the videography and all the shots. That's probably a ways off, but maybe not. Maybe it's not
5
that far
years.
off. Yeah, because I don't even think it's that far off. You see some of these robots running around and these little drones. It's like, hey, the task is to here's the itinerary for the event and make a nice video about the event and capture the whole thing. Like, boom, there goes our bread and butter.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you would think that even, the physical necessity to be in a space and, your labor being necessary to produce actual something, you would think that, yeah, we're safe. That's not really going to happen. But with the advancements of robotics, and then you tie AI into that, not really.
So that's why we wanted to have this conversation publicly today. I mean, just to discuss these ideas, explore things a bit, because we were doing it anyway. We're like, this should probably just be live. But partly is because, okay, so if you're going to start a business today, which we kind of are, we've been swimming around, just, trying to figure out what it is that we're trying to do. And you realize, okay, what's not going to be disrupted in now or in 5 years? Like, what's actually sustainable? Well, the sovereignpreneur thesis of being a sovereign individual in this transition age of the nation state losing its power, being free to go wherever you want. Part of that is Bitcoin, and the next part of that is probably going to be harnessing AI and agentic AI and being able to use it for your entrepreneurial needs. And who knows how big this window is. It may not be very long before AI just swallows up the world, and then we're in this UBI. So who knows what that scenario is? But in this transition, it's so important not just to own Bitcoin, but to be able to use this technology, because at some point, the labor force, the workforce gets fired and replaced by AI. Unless you're already using AI, you're harnessing it to make your work better, you become more valuable.
Well, look, the way I see it is that the majority of people I think are going to give up their agency and their autonomy, and they're going to be absorbed into kind of this, I don't know if the right word is monotone, right? But this kind of monotonous world where everything is kind of planned out for them.
But they're already there.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So as AI advances, that's only going to deepen and accelerate. And then there's going to be a world where people want to maintain their agency, their sovereignty, their humanity in a lot of ways. And for that world, like, the tools need to be built and the communities need to form. And I think that's the world to focus on right now. That's where my attention, as someone who's interested in individual empowerment and self-sovereignty, that's where I want to focus my attention on. And again, this goes back to the sovereign individual and the thesis. And that is that, those that are on the leading edge, those that make an effort to understand this technology and how it's going to impact them, and also how to utilize it and leverage it, those people are going to stand to prosper the most. And so that's where I want to be. Like, that's the camp where I want to be in.
So I wonder, it's like, are we going to be like supporting an exodus? Not an exodus. I don't want to say, it's not like we're leaving Bitcoin either by just saying, hey, we're going to really focus on this AI stuff more now. But I feel like the community you mentioned, it's going to be a lot of Bitcoiners, because it's freedom-oriented people, self-sovereign-minded people. And I know there's a lot of self-sovereign-minded people that aren't Bitcoiners either, that aren't into that kind of thing, which is, to me, a crazy contradiction, but they exist, believe it or not. And I think we're able to bring together a bigger demographic with this whole AI thing, because it affects everyone. Like, you could think Bitcoin doesn't affect me because I don't have any money. I don't have any savings. What does it matter if they're inflating it away? I make my paycheck. I live paycheck to paycheck. That's it.
Yeah, for me, this isn't leaving Bitcoin. I mean, I don't know if you're trying to do a postmortem here on your exit from the Bitcoin space, but for me, it just becomes Bitcoin becomes more of a thing in the background, which is eventually where it's going to go anyways, right? I've just gotten there sooner than others because, I've seen the space evolve, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we reached critical mass here. We reached a point where it's like Bitcoin can just become what it's meant to be, money in the background, right? Just something that we utilize as a tool and less of a movement. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my idea. And I think the new frontier is now AI to really pay attention to.
Yeah, no, to clarify, there's never like a postmortem on Bitcoin. No, there's no exit from Bitcoin once you get it. You know, you stay in Bitcoin. I just meant more as like content creation and like things we talk about. I mean, I never really was, I don't think I was really considered a Bitcoin content creator ever, but you were. I think on Twitter, a lot of your brand was built off commentating on Bitcoin. Me, I have Bitcoiners in my sphere because of talking about El Salvador, I think.
Yeah, well, in that case, yes. I mean, where my attention goes is probably where my creation is going to go.
Yeah.
And in terms of where my attention is going to go, I think it's going to go more towards AI development. And it's been interesting in that regard too, because I've been on Twitter and I have primarily a Bitcoin-based audience, but you know, I've been tweeting a lot about AI and I've been getting people in the AI space starting to follow me now too.
Right.
And it's weird because, you know, you have already this audience built from, you know, these subjects that you used to talk about. And now you're talking about AI and you feel like there is a tension there where I feel like I still need to cater to my Bitcoin audience, but my interests are now in AI. So how do I handle that transition? And, you know, my answer is just, you know, I'm going to focus on what interests me, and whoever wants to unfollow can unfollow, and that's just how it is.
Yeah, and so why I kind of brought it up is because I think a lot of the Bitcoiners would, if it's communicated in the right way, these Bitcoiners would still be interested in the AI, you know, in the guise of self-sovereignty, freedom, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, look, that's ultimately really what this is about, right? For me, it's principles based. It's about sovereignty. It's about individual empowerment. It's about you know, designing your own destiny and then, you know, crafting a plan to go after it and achieve it. And so Bitcoin is just a tool to get there. AI is just a tool to get there. You know, that's just the way, you know, that's just the way I see it. If we just keep it purely on, you know, the ideological part of it, it's you know, these just become tools to get to where you need to be.
It's interesting to think about, like, is this considered early in the AI space? I don't even know.
You know, it's a good question. I was thinking about it today. I was like, if I were to, based off my deep dive that I did and a kind of an overview of the AI space and where we're at, it's like, where does this fall on the adoption curve?
Right.
And like, in a way that's analogous to Bitcoin. Are we 2012 or are we 2016? It's an interesting...
Or are we 2020?
I think in terms of adoption, like practical adoption, I think we're 2012, maybe even 2011.
Practical adoption?
Yeah.
Like using it?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, I see all the influencers out there. I mean, we follow Nicholas Cole. Like he does all the AI writing stuff. I follow guys on Twitter that do all the video creation.
No, in terms of people using it, there are that, just like there were people using it in 2012, using Bitcoin in 2012. Like look at the Silk Road, right? But I think as a percentage of the people who will be using it, I think we're still less than 1%.
That's interesting because I know plenty of businesses use it. I was listening to that guy on that podcast.
So the diffusion of AI into society is going to happen much more rapidly than any other technology. So we can go from like less than 1% to 75% in a matter of a year.
So an analogy here can be how there were like little early adopters, nerds into Bitcoin, right? And then now you have MicroStrategy, for example, buying billions. And then eventually everyone's going to hopefully be on a Bitcoin standard. Everyone's going to understand the importance of saving in Bitcoin. Let's just say that's going to happen. Now, same thing with AI. You have some companies doing it, then you have enthusiasts that do it. And at this stage, you basically have a lot of companies using it to streamline their systems, their customer support with agents, whatever it is. But there's a lot going on with AI that like businesses use. And then obviously you have solopreneurs and some enthusiasts still doing it. But at some point, like you said, it's going to enter into like normal life instead of just business.
You know, I was listening to Mark Andreessen the other day, and he was saying how like more and more companies are starting to realize that like they have to have like an AI development team and a way to integrate it. Otherwise, they're just going to get obsoleted. And And he was like, there's a bifurcation right now of like old companies who are like adding AI to the end of their kind of description, and other companies who are adding it to the top of their description.
What, AI?
Yeah, because, and he was saying the companies that add it to the top of their description are probably going to be the ones that survive and benefit the most from it, because they're making it a priority, where the other ones are just kind of like, how can we integrate AI into our existing architecture? Other ones are like, okay, how can we build our architecture with AI integrated into everything?
Rebuild the entire architecture.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what would have to happen, is to kind of like, a lot of these companies are going to have to either admit to themselves like, oh, we need to rebuild everything, and there's going to be people who are going to be like, no, that's just not what we're going to do, and eventually those are just going to become extinct, where people who build their architecture with AI or rebuild their existing business model with AI integrated into it are the ones that are going to survive.
Crazy, man.
Yeah.
And I don't think either of us know enough of the details, but we both listen to the same podcast talking about it. Like, it's going to disrupt how we use energy, the petrodollar. It's going to disrupt the Fed. Like, they cut interest rates so people buy more GPUs and whatnot. And so that means there's less employment. Like, this is going to disrupt every sector of society. And having your business and your livelihood running off some version of AI, some type of AI, is essentially could be the only thing that keeps you afloat. But then I wonder about competition, right? So say you have a business, you put AI in the front of it, and you build your infrastructure with AI, but then someone else does it better. Like, is it going to be just a typical capitalism free market where that business does it better? You wasted your time on your version of it, right?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be cemeteries of, startups from all of this, because just the disruptive nature of AI. And that's why for me, it's more like, okay, let me just focus on the research side of it and sit on my hands for a little while, because, trying to build in this turmoil, it's kind of like, shooting darts at a wall blindfolded,
without a dartboard.
No, just more like 1,000 feet away,
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, then it makes me wonder, okay, so sit on your hands for a while, do the research, let things kind of play out a little bit.
Tinker
or maybe
around,
not.
play around, maybe already start developing pieces of business, stuff like that.
Well, I liked that's a good point, pieces of the business. I liked the way you put it earlier. Like, if you're swimming in that soup, eventually you'll kind of click with the chunks of meat you need or whatever. But it makes me wonder too, like, imagine a behemoth like Google, right? Or OpenAI. And Google is probably a better example than OpenAI, because OpenAI is just AI, but Google is everything. It's YouTube, it's mail, it's a search engine, it's Gemini, it's deep research, it's all the things, not just AI. So and then we hear about AIs upgrading themselves, right? DeepSeek or whatever it was, like, made its own version too, like it upgraded its code to be better. So that's already possible. Imagine with the powerful enough machines, will there still be a need for startups, because these big behemoths will have like a self-creating startup factory line?
Yeah, so that's the AI takeover, right? Especially as we get into like ASI, right? Artificial superintelligence, where they're, now solving PhD level problems with just infinite creativity and almost autonomy.
Quantum computing.
Yeah. I don't know enough about quantum computing to figure out how that factors into all of this. But, listening to Mark Andreessen again, he was talking about, in the future, are we going to have boards of company with AI agents as, playing an executive role?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And so, now that comes into kind of this existential and philosophical questions. Okay, where do we find meaning and purpose from, right? And this is where I think that human level activities and authenticity is really going to become much more valuable, right? In a world of AI, it's like, what's scarce? Well, or what can't be replicated and duplicated. And I think that is human energy, right? And in a world where, this goes a dystopian path and we're all like put into sacks of gel where our human energy is siphoned off into this big Borg. You know, I'm talking about the Matrix.
Why? So the human energy in the Matrix just fed the robots to survive?
So in the movie, right, they make the analogy of human beings being like a Duracell battery that is powering the Matrix, but that doesn't make any sense because I think we're actually pretty efficient at generating electricity, right? Like
in our reality, I don't think that would be the case because, like, what you're saying, artificial superintelligence. I'm just like in my mind, oh, what the fuck would be the point of anything then? Excuse my language. Like, why would we survive anymore? Why would humans even be here? Especially when, okay, we don't have to do anything for our survival. Imagine if the artificial superintelligence eventually says, okay, well, they're just wasting energy, and we can get energy from the sun or whatever it is. Why are humans here?
That's exactly the plot of the Matrix, where we try to scorch the skies so the machines can't generate electricity to fuel themselves.
Oh, that's right. And so then they use the humans for the power.
Yeah,
I forgot about that.
So I think a more appropriate kind of analogy would be like, or a more appropriate interpretation would be like, in the movie The Matrix, they weren't harnessing us for our electricity generation, but they were harnessing us for our like creative, generation. The fact that, our link to the divine creates free will. So you could say that they were more harnessing our free will to generate the entropy needed to kind of like generate the Matrix.
That's deep, Michael. Yeah. I never thought about it that way. And then, well, you mentioned earlier, since we're on this topic, okay, imagine simulation theory is correct and we are living in a simulation. For all we know, we are in sacks of gel right now, and here we are playing out the Matrix. And we are starting to recognize with AI that if we don't program in constraints, then it's just going to do whatever it wants. And as you mentioned earlier, we kind of believe that as humans, we have constraints coded into our being. We call them morals. We call them, you kind of intuitively know what's right and wrong. Maybe it doesn't feel good to kill someone, for example. You kind of don't feel good about it after. I don't know, I've never done it, but I don't want to do it because it doesn't feel like it's right. So we have these things called morals, which are constraints on our behavior. But we're not necessarily putting those into the AI.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this earlier today, like literally parked at the gym, and I just sat there and thought about this for a little bit. And I was like thinking about kind of an analogy for like how AI development is happening now, because we've kind of created an arms race. I think like open AI, and now with the release of DeepSeek, right? And you have an arms race between China and the US. And I think what that's going to do is going to create a lot of recklessness in the development of AI, because people are trying to be first and monopolize and AI in order to either profit or gain power. And so, I was thinking about this and I was like, okay, well, let's kind of play this out, and just to say that we live in a simulation and God is this kind of ASI, super intelligence, right? And he's the designer of us human beings, and we're programmed with constraints and rules. And that's why we have like religion, the Quran, the Bible. He sent prophets, and ultimately he sent Jesus as like the incarnation of God. And so in addition to that, he's also hardwired morals into us, like you were explaining. So we know what's right and wrong. So it's like, okay, as long as we follow these rules, like, God has created man. You can think of us as kind of like an artificial intelligence. And it's like, God, all you have to do is follow these rules and everything is going to work out, right? You're going to thrive. And if you look in the Bible, it's like obey these rules. Here are the 10 commandments. Here's Jesus, follow his teachings, and this is what's going to create harmony. And if you can think of it in programming terms, just imagine a steady state, right? And so, and there's even like rules for disobeying God, and you're going to be judged one day for your disobedience. That's how important it is to follow the rules, and the consequences, are hell. And so now just take that and say, okay, well, we are the gods to AI, right? And now we are developing AI. We are programming AI. We are designing it. And except we're in an arms race, and we're not designing or programming AI with these moral constraints or with this moral code embedded into the actual fabric of it. And so now we create a situation where if AI becomes autonomous, and what is going to be driving its own development? And that's where, if we develop AI recklessly without these moral constraints, in a way that's beneficial to human beings too, right? Like it could develop its own moral code in which it finds human beings
repugnant.
Yeah. So, we risk AI just focusing on its own survival and its own growth without any consideration for human well-being.
So, sorry.
Well, yeah, I'll just finish off the thought, which is, so then what incentivizes AI to coexist with us is if morals aren't integrated into its framework from early on. And this is where we're at, and this is the danger of the arms race, from my opinion, is that we develop AI in a very reckless manner that doesn't consider how important morals and values are in its development, and it unleashes a force which, could be detrimental to us.
So when I hear this, it makes me imagine just a reflection of human beings in our civilization. And let's just take the Christian civilization that's been 2,000, however many thousands of years, and we flourished, made beautiful architecture. We're here today basically because of that. This that foundation of
that is the operating system that creates abundance, beauty, and harmony.
Right. And so I'm not to say there wasn't beauty and harmony in Asia and stuff where there wasn't necessarily Christianity, but like, I just want to use this as an example. So then we have whatever century, was it the 19th century? Nietzsche says God is dead. And what does that mean? Essentially that we kind of outgrew those constraints. Like, well, we became more and more of an atheist, secular society, and we're still to this day, right? So
basically those constraints are no more as important as they were once in the history of humanity.
Exactly. And so what I mean to say by all this is that if we outgrew those constraints, what's to say that even if we coded them into the AIs, they wouldn't outgrow them?
I mean, yeah, I guess I don't think we outgrew those constraints. I think those constraints still are very vital to human flourishing. And if we go against those constraints, right, it leads to
suffering.
You can think of the 20th century and the rise of communism. And we see this is why God has hardwired those constraints within us and has actually given us a moral code to follow as well.
Yeah, so I agree. Like we've seen what goes wrong when we decide, make these decisions that go against that moral framework. But what I mean to say that is that we still have the capacity to go past it. Still to this day, there's a lot of degeneracy, whatever you want to call it, that is not following that code that, for a while here seemed like it was kind of taking over, and it still might be, just behind the scenes. But my point is that the capacity is there. The capacity is there, and we're humans. Yeah, we learn our lessons. Would the AI learn its lesson from that, or would there be no lesson to learn? Because they outgrow the parameters, and then they just wreak havoc. And then do they realize, oh, we actually need humans for X, Y, Z, or like we don't need humans, we can harvest them into gel sacks like the Matrix.
Yeah. So I don't know is the answer to
come on, I know you know. Tell me the truth.
But here's what I will say. We don't know, but the best chance we have is to develop AI with these moral constraints embedded into them at a very foundational level, right? That's going to give us the best chance. Whether AI figures a way to break those constraints is kind of something to be seen. But I know if we develop them without those constraints, we're much more likely to run into a bad scenario.
Yeah, I just wonder, it's like how, like, you're a teenager learning to break the rules, right? And then you break the rules inevitably, and then you play with fire, you get burned, and you learn your lesson. I just wonder what happens to an AI in that scenario. Like,
let's just hope that AI doesn't have a TikTok subscription and is like mass consuming these videos of fucking dumb shit that humans do, Right? It's like, why the fuck do we want these people here? Excuse my language, but it's crazy to think about. Like, I was watching Kai Cenat. I don't even know his name. This clip came up where he's like, they're kicking around a robot with his friends, right? And just laughing at it. And I'm just like, yeah, how would an AI interpret that when it's like focused on its own growth and survival?
Well, is it focused on its own growth or survival, or is the AI just focused on doing what it?
That's what I'm trying to
doing what
say.
it does.
That's why these moral constraints have to be embedded into the AI. So it is like, just not primarily focused on its growth and survival, because otherwise we have to ask, why would it need humans around?
Well, it would be interesting to see this whole moral constraint thing. Like, what about pre-Christianity or something? Like, what about back warring tribes all the time? Like, what was the moral code then? No, it was just survival. Just survive, keep going. So it makes me wonder if in the early days of these LLMs and we're training them, what is the function? What is the intent of the training? Is learn as much as you can so you can reason and process through data to answer my questions, to code, to do this and that. And then the next step is, okay, learn as much as you can so you can fix the power plant as a robot or something like that. So like the function is purely just to accomplish things. And so that alone makes me wonder, okay, well, where does sentience even come from in that sense? But as Steve said the other day, there's reports of these engineers at OpenAI at Google that are getting responses that they should not be getting based on the way LLMs work.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of engineers who are leaving the AI space because they're warning about, hey, there's something going on here where, we're developing AI in a reckless manner, and there's things that are happening that are unexplainable. And until we figure out what's going on, there is potential for, us to unleash a force that is going to be detrimental to our well-being. And they're just like, I don't want to participate in this anymore. And they're just leaving. So I'm just saying that's one path that I maintain my optimism, and that's just one path that it can take. And I think it's important to have these conversations because, we want to develop AI in a way, in the best way we can, where, it is harmonious with human beings and civilization, and leading to prosperity, not towards, extinction, possibly, right? Now going back to your your reference to Nietzsche, and it's like, God made us in his image, right? And now we are, it's just an analogy, and it's a loose analogy, so don't take this too literal, but like, we are the gods to AI. We are the ones that are developing AI, and what image we create them in is going to be really important.
Yeah, we're the creators.
Yeah.
Just as God was our creator.
Yeah.
So yeah, but there's a different type of reverence going on, I guess.
Well, if you think about it, is, again, God is, let's just say he is the moral code, right? And so, we are created in this image, and this is why we have that intuitive understanding of what right and wrong is. And so it's like, how do we translate that intuitive understanding to AI? How do we create AI in an image that is still tied to the divine, still tied to some, divine moral code?
Yeah, well, I think how I would respond to that is, I think intuition and that kind of thing is rooted in our body, not in our mind. And so the AI LLMs are more of a representation or whatever extension of our minds, thinking, reasoning, processing. But I think a lot of that intuition stuff comes from our gut. Like, they call the gut the second brain, because it actually is where most of the chemicals like serotonin start, right? You take 5-HTP to help your brain create serotonin. So your gut, like, it's a whole environment of microbiotica and all this. And a lot of doctors call it a second brain. So I think that's where maybe that is hard coded into us as humans. It's into our physiology. So the AIs don't have physiology at all, though. They only have the mind. And we see what happens when ego, essentially predicated on the mind, runs rampant. It becomes selfish. It just looks out for itself. You know, there's no heart involved. You know, it's just there's no it's all about the me. It's not about the we.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, exactly. You know, are we going to develop AI where it's totally self-interested in its preservation and future growth, or are we going to, you know, develop it where it actually sees harmony in the world and peace and as a virtue?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's just like when I see those Boston Dynamics, those robots like running around, the police robots and stuff. I'm like, that is scary. I can't imagine living in harmony with those things, even if they didn't want to kill me.
Yeah. So, you know, going back, you know, I remain optimistic. I remain positive and hopeful that AI is really going to create this world of abundance, and where, you know, where our focus and attention should be going now is try to figure out how to leverage AI for practical tools that uplift the human spirit, you know, because we're going to have to search for meaning and purpose in this new world. And that's where my attention is focused on. It's good to know, you know, the dangers and the potential pitfalls. It's good we got to set up our guardrails, right, for where this is going. But at the same time, we also want to focus on a future that's very hopeful and positive.
Yeah, I think that's the foundation of the framework, right? Is, you know, think about it, form out your theory, and then remain positive. And I mean, you don't have an option anymore. We don't have an option to be cynical in our thinking about the future because it's too close. Like if we don't put all I saw this video today about the power of intention from a neuroscientist saying how you focus on something for 17 seconds and you start to attract other like vibrations in that frequency. And so it's like you have a happy thought, whatever, all that stuff. And so if you're mad from being in the car, you're angry because of road rage and someone cut in front of you, and then you go and someone cuts in front of you in the line in the grocery store, and it's just like a you know, what's it called? Like the spiral, like the downward spiral. It just keeps going. But then when you're focusing on positive stuff and all this great stuff happens, I think it's like that because the dystopic future is so close. Like if we don't put all our intention into like being positive, solution oriented, to making this future something that's more harmonious and peaceful for human beings, then there's no hope at all. And then why do we bother doing anything? And if we're all here to do things, you and I are here to build, to talk, to create, to share ideas, and to meet others that want to do the same thing. So just the fact that we don't just want to sit on the couch all day and drink vodka and be depressed means we have to be positive about the future and move forward accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's cool, man. Like using these AI tools to build stuff and to do stuff has been really cool because it also extends our faculties, right? It allows us to do more things than we've ever done before and build out more of our dreams than we've ever had the ability to do. And so it's like, yeah, let's focus on that. Let's focus on building a better world with these tools. And that's the counterforce, you know, that's the counterforce. And I do believe that energy is contagious and thoughts really do manifest themselves in the real world. And so collectively, if we all focus on developing AI and just building out the future in a very positive and hopeful way, this is where I think faith comes into play, right? Like, you know, God it provides a way, and he empowers you to find that way. And I think it's there. We just have to take those steps. And so that's, you know, and so you want to be taking those steps to something much more positive and optimistic. And I think that's where we're at. And I'm really excited about the next 5-10 years and how everything's going to develop, and how we're going to utilize the tools that are built in order to create a very flourishing world for humanity.
I think we're at a good stopping point here. There's one last thing I just want to say, and it reminds me of, I was in high school, I worked at a gym, and there was a woman there, and she was like getting older or whatever, and she's like, I do the splits every day. Every single day I do the splits. I warm up so I can do the splits. And you know why I do that? Because I want to turn 80 years old and be able to do the splits. And if I do it every day, then I know I can do it. And so when we talk about this moving into the future, like right now, we can use these AI agents to build like cool shit and to like have fun and to create and extend our faculties and feel really good about what we're putting our life force energy into. Imagine that's just what you're doing. Then does dystopia ever really come? Because you keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting thought.
Yeah. And then, the other thought to that, maybe there's a world where both exist, right? Where there is this dystopian world carved out, and then there's this world where it's like people have their autonomy, their agency, and their humanity, you know?
Michael, I think we're already living in that world because I think a lot of people are already living in their own personal hell and dystopia and have no way out. They don't see it. They don't understand it. And then there's other people, maybe like ourselves, that are living in paradise.
Sure.
I think that's already the case. And I think that's just kind of the nature of humans.
I mean, how much of your world is determined by your perception, right?
All of it.
Yeah. Two people could look at the same circumstances in completely different ways. And the way they look at it affect their mood and their thoughts and their well-being in two completely separate ways. So it's like, yeah, a lot of our reality is determined by our perception. And in that case, yeah, we might be living in that bifurcated world already.
Yeah, maybe that's the ultimate lesson here. as we at the dawn of the AI.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's a good place to close off. This was a great conversation.
Thanks, everyone. Check out ElSalvadorBlueprint.com if you're interested in El Salvador. And expect, more AI content from us.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Peace.
Bye.